Hello everyone, I'm Sylvia from Fairlight Tarot. Welcome to my channel and welcome to the second episode of Tarot in the Times of. If you haven't watched the first episode of this series, this is a completely new series in my channel and it's something that I wanted to do for a while. I'm looking at topics such as happiness, anxiety, trauma, that was the first episode, anger, but also inner child work, shadow work, and others. And I'm showing you how through the combination of specific tarot and oracle decks and specific spreads, we can enrich our personal practice of self-care. Now, the usual disclaimer, I am not a licensed therapist, nor am I a healthcare professional. What I'm going to show you today is the result of an over 3 decades long experience with tarot for personal care, and it's meant for educational and entertainment purposes only. Today's episode is about grief, and specifically is the grief of mourning someone close to you that has departed. Now, since this is a rather difficult topic and it's going to be quite personal for me, the introduction to this episode is going to be slightly longer than what I intended, because I feel like we need to clarify a few things. But I didn't want to just have an empty screen and my voice over talking, because that could be a bit distracting, a bit boring. So what I'm going to do, I am going to talk and I'm also going to show you a few tarot decks that I'm going to use and oracle decks that I'm going to use during this episode, so that you can familiarize yourself with these decks, and at the same time we can have a look at really beautiful cards. Now, this is the Forager's Daughter Tarot and it's the Afterlight edition. So this topic of grief is going to be based on my personal experience with grief. I have unfortunately lost a few people that were really close to my heart in my life. In specific, I have lost my mum when I was very young. She died following a gruesome illness. And then I lost my dad to COVID, and I lost one of my closest friends. The reason why I'm going to share my personal experience is because I have full knowledge of this experience. I have knowledge of the full extent of this experience and the impact on myself, on my emotional state of being, and on my feelings. And I think that we can know many things, we can study many things, but as I said, I'm not a licensed therapist. I have a certain knowledge due to years of study of the human brain and of human behavior. So this is not going to be a therapy session. This is going to be, as I said before, my relationship with grief that I offer to you as an example, and I hope that my experience with it will open up a light into your own path. If it resonates with you, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I'm also going to leave my personal email in the description box below. Not because I can promise you anything, because I cannot. But because what I can give you is the feeling that by sharing my experience, you may perhaps not feel alone in what you're going through. And that to me is already a win-win, because as we can see during this video, I will point out many times that one of the most effective way to heal after grieving is to create meaningful connections. Now, it's very important for me to say what my personal process of grieving consists of. Grief is something unique. Now, this was the Forager's Daughter Tarot Afterlight edition, and and I'm going to show you a different deck that we're going to use today. This is the When My Soul Whispered Oracle deck by Melissa Salvaggio, and the artwork is by Jess O'Connor. Now, to go back to what I just said about grief. Grief is one of the most unique human experiences, most unique human emotions, and it is very different from person to person. There is no manual that says that one way of grieving is correct and another way of grieving is not. Grief is unique. These things are just there for us to try and feel like we're not alone. If we feel that we can recognize the stage we're at into someone else's experience, it's probably better for us because we don't feel alone in it. But trust me, it doesn't help. It does, but only to a certain extent. So my personal, what I went through when I had to grieve several times in my life was, in some cases, yes, there was denial. My main denial wasn't necessarily on the factual reality. I knew that my mom had passed. I knew that my dad and my friend had passed. There was no denial in that. It was an actual fact. What I did allow myself to deny was the emotional reality of it. In my mind, I knew that they were not there anymore, but I acted as if that was not the case. I acted as if they were still there with me, and I always told myself that there was a way for me to remember them. I now know, after many years, that was my own way of trying to push away any kind of improvement in my grieving process. Whether I was doing that consciously or not, that's a different story. I don't think I was aware of doing that, but that was definitely the result. So what happened within myself was this. I was hurt so much that I convinced myself that it was a righteous thing to do. I convinced myself that because I hadn't been given what I wanted to be enough time, what I considered enough time with this person, in such a way that I had the possibility to tell them how much I loved them. I had the possibility to show them how much I loved them. I had the opportunity to ask them to forgive me for whatever reason. Because let me tell you, there's a lot of sense of guilt that comes with grief. No matter whether it's justified or not, there is a lot of sense of guilt. You keep on asking yourself, and I will refer to myself, I kept on asking myself, did I tell them that time that we went out? Did I tell them that I was maybe pushing them away because I had different reasons? Did I tell them how much I loved them? Did I tell them enough? Did I make it so that they understood how important they were in my life? Or could I have done something more? Could I have possibly said that in a different way? Did I do something to hurt them, and did I do something to correct that? Did they forgive me? They're not there anymore. You cannot ask them to answer these questions. So unless you had the opportunity to do that, because perhaps it wasn't a sudden death, in that case, I can tell you though that my mum's passing was not sudden at all. She's been very, very ill for many, many years. And I still never got to ask her those questions. First of all, because I was in denial, okay? But also because you have to work out a lot of courage to confront yourself with the other persons. And I can assure you that it's not easy at all. Okay, so that was, When My Soul Whispered Oracle deck. We're going to see it later. It's a very beautiful, kind oracle deck. This is the White Sage Tarot in a Tin by Teresa Hutch. This is a mass market deck. It's probably one of my favorite decks for this kind of work, of personal work, self-care work. So, what happened in the next step of my grieving process? I noticed that I tended to step away from everything, from anyone. I tended to believe that that was due. Let me explain what I mean with that. I tended to believe that if I had had a connection, if I had felt a connection with someone else, so say for example, my closest friend died. When she died, I did not want to see my other friends. I didn't want to go out. Yes, of course, I was grieving at first, and I was probably a mess for a long time. But the reason why I never even made an effort to, get a shower, dress up, and just go out for a walk. Okay, it doesn't take much. And believe me, I had a lot of people reaching out to me and almost forcing me to react. And I had a very negative reaction to that. I closed myself inward. I really did not want to see them, nor hear from them, nor, even think about them. And the reason why I was doing that is because I felt as if by going out, let's say going out, but it could have been any kind of activity in which you have a connection, you develop this connection to someone else, a meaningful connection to someone else. Anytime I would have done something like that, it was to me a way to betray the person that had just passed. And I felt like on the one hand, I needed to atone for guilt that I didn't even know I had, in the sense that I could not even put my finger on anything that I had done. Of course, we were friends. We've been friends for many years. So obviously, sometimes we fighted. I mean, it's normal. And don't get me started on the fights that I had with my mom, or a whole different chapter would be talking about the fights that I had with my dad. It's human relationships. It's nobody's fault. But somehow, when the other person is not there anymore, we feel like we have to push away any possible chance that we have at being happy, because we need to atone for that. We don't want to be happy because we want to still keep on grieving. We want to mourn them. We want to feel bad. We want to feel depressed, because it's a way for us to show how much we cared for them, how important they were in our lives. And we feel that if we just, for 1 second, we let go of that incredibly strong and powerful feeling that grief is, we probably would really lose them forever. They will not be there with us anymore. Grief is probably seen as the last legacy we have of them. The way we feel about them, the emptiness and the void we feel when someone is not there anymore, is the last thing we hang on to in order for them to not be completely gone. I want you to reflect on that. It's an extremely important part of this process in our self-care practice, because by all means, this is incredibly human, this is completely normal, but it's important that we understand something. Pushing people away, not grieving properly, is actually going on the opposite direction of the healthy way of grieving. And I'll explain why. So this is the White Sage Tarot by Teresa Hutch. This is as you can see, a Pippish deck. The reason why I really like to use this deck when I do this kind of readings is because it's peepish. So the fact that it's peepish, for example, let me elaborate a little bit more about the card. But the fact that I use this one and not other peepish decks is also because, as you can see, there are colors in the pips, and these colors are referred to the colors. There you go. To the colors of the chakras. There you go. So that gives you an idea on what kind of energy this specific card, for example, conveys. So this was the White Sage Tarot by Teresa Hatch. Another tarot that I want to show you today, because it's going to be part of my practice about grief, is the Mara Lune or Mara Lune. Sorry, I don't know whether the E needs to be pronounced at the end or not. And this tarot deck is incredibly gentle, it's incredibly soft, not just because of the pastel colors, but also because of the artwork. It is also kind of a peepish deck, but let's have a look at it. So basically, to go back to what I was saying, the only way to, let's say, take away that numbness is to let yourself grieve. And you cannot grieve, you cannot heal if you push away all these feelings. So if you fight them, they'll never go away. There are a few steps that I take, and through the years, so about 30 years and counting, the first step of all is to identify the true nature of the person that has passed. Let's call this person the departed, just to make it more simple. And the second step is to identify in ourselves, so in myself, the parts of me that are there that only exists because I have met this person, because this person was in my life, because this person was an important part of my life, and they may have influenced myself in such a way that I developed certain kind of predispositions, for example, or because they were there, they showed me that I was doing something wrong, and therefore I gained something in my personality that I would not have gained if it wasn't for them. So I like to think of these parts as the parts inside ourselves that exist only thanks to them, thanks to the fact that they were in our lives. Once we identify these parts, that's the most difficult step. And I needed to understand how to honor these parts of myself that only existed because in my life I had met this person. Once I understand how to honor these parts of myself, then of course it is my task, and that is the completion of the grieving, in which I recognize that the only true way to carry with me the legacy of this person is to honor and nurture these parts of myself. This is the only way in which I personally feel like I'm always with them. I have been working so hard throughout all these years in identifying those parts of myself that were there, that have been born, that have been gifted to me by their presence in my life, that whenever I do something related to these parts of myself, I feel like they're still with me. The person that is departed is still with me. So it is at the beginning a conscious process. You do have to do some kind of introspecting work to ID, so to identify, to point them out, to recognize them, these parts of yourself. But once you have, it is not a conscious process anymore. You do that and it comes to you immediately. And I will give you just this one example because I feel like it probably resonates with a lot of people. This wonderful friend of mine, her name was Daniela. I called her Danny. So this wonderful friend of mine, she had the most smart way to give out nicknames to people. It was, I don't know, I was in awe every time. She just knew perfectly how to give nicknames, not just people. She actually personified objects sometimes, and I'll tell you this. For example, once I remember I had an iPod, and but it broke down, and I was really, I really liked that iPod. I think it was probably my first iPod, right? And I love music, and then I was listening to this iPod the whole time. But at a certain point, somehow in the software, something went wrong. And I remember that Danny was calling him Gigi. Now, Gigi is an Italian nickname for Luigi, Luis. And I know that per se, it doesn't sound funny. But when you have an object and you personify the object and you give them a funny name, because you have to admit, it sounds a bit funny, Gigi. I had never really noticed that she called my iPod Gigi. Like, I knew that she did, but it had never really been important for me. But when it broke down, I remember being a bit miserable because it was expensive back then. And I went to her and I was really miserable looking down, you know. And I said, my iPod broke. And she went, oh no, Gigi broke down. And that moment there, I knew why she had called it like that. It was so typical her that I will always remember that. And every now and then, I don't have an iPod anymore because, as you know, obviously iPhones have replaced iPods. But I just look at my iPhone sometimes and I think I call it Gigi. And every time I do that, I remember why she did that. I remember that she made me feel better. I remember that this was her typical way to just give out nicknames to things and people. And it was always perfect. That if she hadn't been in my life, I would not have this way of, finding the perfect nickname for things and people. So by doing that, and every time I do that, recognizing that I do that only because she was in my life, it's a way for me to honor her. It's a way for me to know that she is with me. I hope that that message resonates with you. And now this was the Maralun tarot, very beautiful tarot. We're going to see it later in the spread. So now I'm going to show you the spread that I use, and you're welcome to share it. So in this case, it's a bit of a mix of tarot and oracle decks, and it's also a bit of a mix of picking the card you want and pulling other cards. Now, first of all, position number one, so I will just put it here. I always do this. I go through a deck, and I, after thinking about the person that has passed, that departed, and really thinking about them, really knowing them, really knowing what their core essence, their quintessence was. Once I do that, I generally can identify a card, or even more than one card in a deck, in a tarot deck, that to me is representing them. Now, in Daniela's case, for example, she was the embodiment of the Queen of Wands. There's so much. I honestly, when I studied the archetypes of the court cards, and I was studying the Queen of Wands, immediately I thought, yeah, this is Dani. It may not always be this clear cut, so what you might want to do, you may choose two cards. Just to give you an example, just to show you, today I'm going to, in order to represent her, I'm going to use the Queen of Wands and the Four of Wands. The reason was that she's the typical embodiment of the Queen of Wands. The Four of Wands is a choice as well to represent her, because she absolutely loved having people over for any kind of occasion. I remember going shopping with her sometimes, and she was just picking up an item, and just a random item, and say, hey, I'm just gonna buy like 1,000 of these, and then on the next dinner I'm just gonna put them at the table for people to take home with them. I was like, is there any event you haven't told me? No, just any dinner, whatever, the next dinner. And for her, it was always about the next dinner. And I will always appreciate that. The fact that she gave me an example, such a powerful example of how important connections are. So let's have a look. Where is the Queen of Wands and the... Okay, so this is the Queen of Wands in the Forager's Daughter Afterlight edition, and this is the Four of Wands in the same deck. And I also picked up the Queen of Swords, and the reason why I did that, and it's part of the first position in the spread, is because I see myself as the Queen of Swords. I am definitely recognizing myself as the Queen of Swords, in the sense that I detect a lie by just smelling it. I do not accept any kind of BS, any kind of authority that is not explained, that is not necessary. I do have a problem with that. The last few years, I can let you imagine how hard it was for me to just, do things just because we were told to do things. I always had to understand why we were doing that. But I'm also the kind of person that has been through a lot. If you stick with me and if you watch these videos, particularly this series, which is called Tarot in the Times of, I will share a lot of my personal experience, a lot of my details that pertain to my life, and you will see why I identify with the Queen of Swords. Not because I'm a cold person, which I'm not, but because I do embody that kind of sense of surviving. So, but this is not about me today, so let's have a look at these cards. So what I'll do, I'm just going to put them... I always have problems with fitting everything in the frame, but anyway. So this is the two cards that represent my friend, and I've just deliberately decided that these are the cards that give me the feel for her. So I picked them out of the deck, and then I picked a card that represents me, and I put them all three in a line because we want to be at the same level, in the same space as the other person. Okay, then I'm going to use the White Sage Tarot. Remember, my first step was to really know the departed, and recognize the parts of them that are in ourselves, that we carry in ourselves. And so this is the second step, and that's why I'm going to use the White Sage Tarot, because as I said before, it is a pippish deck, but also by giving you the color of the chakras, it lets you understand one more aspect, one deeper level, let's say, of the tarot meanings, or tarot card meanings. And these are pre-shuffled anyway. Now again, trying to put everything in such a way that everything fits, because then we're gonna have other cards here. I wish I had a wider lens. Oh, of course. Yeah, I said that in the first episode, and I say this again, there is no such a thing as a sample reading. At least in my case, I always channel some kind of energy. Now, to me, the Queen of Pentacles is a resonance, is an echo of the Queen of Wands in regards to Dani. So she was the typical Queen of Wands because she was the performer, but she was also the nurturer, the healer. As I said before, she was the one that I could call at 3 a.m. and she would just show up. and that's the archetype for the Queen of Pentacles, which is the healer. She was that kind of nurturing person. I originally was not like that. I was the Queen of Swords. The part of me that now does that, so you can also call me at 3 a.m. and I will help you out. So exists only thanks to her. So the fact that she was in my life literally transformed me or enriched my personality by allowing me this process of transformation from the Queen of Swords to a Queen of Pentacles. And I'll always be grateful for that. Then the Seven of Pentacles also makes a lot of sense. Danny was a person that was always telling me to not just do things without questioning what I was doing. So the Seven of Pentacles in this case was the fact that now, thanks to the fact that I met her and then I had her in my life, I know that sometimes when I'm working hard, I have to take a moment and just look at where I'm going, to just make sure that where I'm going is the right direction. That's the Seven of Pentacles. That's the energy of the Seven of Pentacles that I have thanks to her. And the Page of Pentacles. Now, she was amazing. To me, the Page of Pentacles is the archetype of the reconnecting with nature. It's the animal lover. It's the person that takes long walks, you know, down the beach or in nature, etc. I used to be a city girl, like through and through. I didn't even want plants because I tended to kill them. Not because I consciously want them to die, but because I just didn't know how to care for them. She had plants galore. She had pets when I was terrified of caring for someone else. She literally gave me that spark of interest for nature, and nature both in the sense of, well, she was a vegan, for example, so she gave me that taste, almost literally, for a different approach to my diet. She loved all kinds of animals. She actually went beyond that. I remember once we were having a walk, a stroll together, and there was this, at a certain point she heard something and I didn't. And she said, no, there's a kitten in distress. And I was like, how on earth did you hear that? I mean, and she literally, there was this labyrinth of blocks that she went through and she kept on hearing. And then I finally heard it too. And it was indeed a kitten in distress. And what happened was that their family had locked him out of in a balcony. So he was locked out. It was on this balcony, and it was really kind. And they couldn't hear it because they had a party downstairs. So we got there, and I remember she just went straight ahead. We used to live in the Netherlands, but her Dutch wasn't. She wasn't very confident with her Dutch. She didn't care. She just, rang the bell. Someone came out, and she literally pointed up to the balcony and just said, "Your cat is outside." And she was being so judgmental. She was literally like, how could you do that to your kitten? So that's the kind of spirit of the Page of Pentacles, in which, we feel sometimes even more at ease with animals than we feel with human beings. She gave me, probably not that I do feel at ease with the humans, but she gave me that kind of love for nature and animals that I did not used to have. And I am so very grateful that she was in my life, because I do have that now. So the third deck that I'm going to use for this position is the When My Soul Whispered Oracle deck. Now, just to summarize, in these two spots is a card from a tarot deck that you feel represents the departed, a card from maybe the same deck or any other deck that you feel represents yourself. Then, but these are picked deliberately. These cards are pulled, so you leave it to your intention. And these are the three things that are part of you that would not be there if it wasn't for the fact that this person was in your life. So these are the three things that we need to A, identify, and B, nurture in order to honor the departed. And again, this deck has been pre-shuffled. So we've got confidence. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so confidence is something that she definitely gave me. But in this position, it also refers to the fact that I need to believe in what I'm doing. I need to believe that the direction I'm in is the right one. If I nurture this aspect, the Seven of Pentacles that she has gifted to me, which tells me every time I'm working hard for something, in a project, in my career, in my life, in a relationship, in everything, if I stop for 1 second and have a look and assess whether what I'm doing is the right thing to do. Once I've done that, build up the confidence to double down on that, to go ahead, to proceed, to work hard for it. I remember once, and this is really going to make me emotional, but she loved my photography. And she knew a lot about photography because of her, well, her sense of style was fantastic. She knew when I was taking a bad photo, she knew when I was taking a good photo, and she never shied away from telling me, which I didn't always appreciate. Sometimes I wanted her to lie to me and to make me feel better, but she never did, which is absolutely fine. I remember once organizing an evening in which I had been projecting on the wall. You remember the you can still project slides, you know, the old type of slides on the wall. And she turned to me and she said, "You take good photos, Sylvia." I knew that that costed her a lot. She wasn't paying a lot of compliments. She just wasn't the type, which is absolutely fine. It is mostly cultural. It was because of our relationship. She was older than me, and she probably saw me as a bit of an apprentice in many things, especially in life. That's why she taught me so much, because I accepted that role of apprentice with her. She gave me the kind of courage to stop what you're doing, have a look at what you're doing, decide whether you're going in the right path, down the right path or not. And once you did, then stick to your guns, have the confidence to go ahead. So the way in which I will nurture these aspects that are part of myself now, just because I had her in my life, my way of nurturing that and honoring that is to have the confidence that she would have wanted me to have. So the position in here is, how do we nurture these three aspects? In my case is have the confidence of, once that you decide that you're going in the right direction, stick to that. Now let's have a look at the last card. So I had to pull up the cards again because otherwise we're not going to fit. And the last deck that I'm going to use is Into the Lonely Woods by, well, this is by Lucy Cavendish, which is quite famous in the Oracle world, and it has been illustrated by Dan May. This particular oracle is at the center of this episode in the sense that you can switch different decks. For example, if you don't have the Voyager's Daughter, in specific the Afterlight edition, you can use any other tarot deck that you feel has a few cards that represent the departed and yourself. If you don't have a gentle kind of soft toned tarot like the White Sage Tarot, you can use any other kind of Pippish or even illustrated deck. that you feel could, could help you identify these aspects that you have as part of yourself because you had this person in your life. And also the When My Soul Whispered Oracle deck can be switched in the sense that, for example, sometimes I even use the Amenti Oracle. The Amenti Oracle is incredibly good in this position. That is, how do I honor, how do I nurture these aspects, these parts of myself? This Oracle has affirmations in it. And it works really well in that in this position. So all these are, can be replaced by a different deck. One deck that I do recommend you get, and that I have so far not been able to replace with any other deck, is this one. So Into the Lonely Woods. Now this, if I can fit it, let me just, not very nice, I understand, but at least we got more room to show you the card. Now in this position we have got what I recognize as a message, okay, a message from the person that is no longer with us. The reason why I use this deck is because it is, let's say it's meant to encourage you to do this kind of process, this kind of grieving process. Let me reiterate, if you refuse to grieve, and it's completely understandable, and I am guilty, oh my goodness, am I guilty of having done that many times for a very long time. It is incredibly human to not want to suffer, to not want to hurt. However, if you refuse to mourn, to grieve, you also cannot heal, or you cannot heal properly. Therefore, if you push it, the more you push it away, the more it will come back. This is not, again, I am not a therapist, but I can assure you 1,000,000% that with all the experience that I had in my life with grief, and all the times in which I did anything I could to just step away from that kind of hurt, it never works. It catches up with you when you least expect it. So by all means, if you feel that stepping away is your way to deal with it, go for it. I am no one to recommend doing one thing or the other, especially because, as I said at the beginning, grief is one of those human emotions that is completely different. It's so subjective. It can work, one thing can work for me and cannot work for you. So I will never stop saying that. But this works for me, and it's something that I want to share with you out there, because perhaps it will work for someone else. And if it does, even if it works for only one person, that will make me happy. That's the whole meaning of why I'm showing you this. So, going back to the Into the Lonely Woods, again, pre-shuffled. Okay, so we got an amazing card. It's such a beautiful, by the way, the artwork in this deck is incredibly kind. I would say that's the word. From the brush strokes to the colors used, which are not vibrant, they're still all in a muted kind of color palette. It's not the noisy kind of deck. Not there's anything wrong with vibrant deck, but this deck, he's speaking with a soft voice. The message are incredibly evocative. So the littlest blessing. This personifies us. This is us. Okay, in this depiction, in this painting, in this card. And the littlest blessing is recognizing that this ladybird is unique. It's such a truly pure expression of nature when it's in communion with this flower, where she's finding nurture and nourishment. That all of this is a blessing. It's a blessing for us when we recognize it, when we take the time to stop and look at how lucky we are to have some things and some people in our life. And this brings me back to the way in which, I will just put it here because otherwise it's... So this brings me back to what I was saying at the beginning, the journey in which I embark upon to go through grieving, to the grieving process, culminate in a message of survival. Survival, because we are undoubtedly the ones that are left behind. But there is a safe and powerful way to move on, which is not pushing away, as I said before, not pushing away the hurt. It's by accepting it, looking at it, but also moving through that, not moving on that, moving through that. It means letting it hurt when you need to. And especially this step is incredibly important, just recognizing that we are the product of all the people that interact with us in our lives. We are who we are right now because we met that person in second grade, because our mom was like that, because our auntie was like that, because our first boss was like that, and you know me, you can go on forever. Okay, not that all these people would have been close to you, but when it's someone that has been close to you, it's even more powerful, it's even stronger. So the parts of yourself that are there thanks to them are even more prominent in your personality. So recognize, identify them, recognize and nurture them, and that's your way to honor the departed. That's your way to process grief. That's your way to answer those questions that I asked at the beginning. Remember, when you hurt because you feel like you didn't have enough time to ask this person, did I tell you enough that I love you? Did I make you understand how important you are for me? Can you forgive me for whatever I feel guilty about? I forgive you. If we haven't had the courage to ask these questions, if we haven't had the time to ask these questions, if we don't have the right answers to these questions because perhaps we were not in a place in which we would hear them and we would listen to them, the only way to move through that is to do this. Honor the departed by honoring in yourself the parts that belong to yourself, but also to them. So I'm going to leave you with this message. This was a very powerful kind of episode for me. There's more to come in the sense that I will go through various other human emotions, like for example, even anger. I think it's a very important one that we need to have in our self-care practice. But also I will do a few specific deep dives into shadow work, into inner child work, and also into love and relationship and why not happiness. For example, happiness is an incredibly powerful human emotion too, when sometimes it can become overwhelming. And I think one important thing to include in our self-care practice is to know when something is overwhelming, to know how to, as I said, move through it. Now, I hope that you liked and enjoyed this video. Consider subscribing to my channel. More to come. Have a great day.